You might be skeptical, but the Douglas A-3 Skywarrior was actually the most accurate dive bomber of the Vietnam War. What's even more remarkable is that the A-3 didn't have a bomb sight. How did the Skywarriors manage to claim that top spot? In a striking departure from its design role as a strategic nuclear platform, the Douglas A-3 Skywarrior found itself thrust into an entirely unexpected mission during the early stages of the Vietnam War conventional dive bombing. The operational history of the Whale in this capacity began on March 3, 1965, when 6 A-3s from Squadron VAH-2 operating from the USS Coral Sea participated in a strike against Bac Long V Island. This marked the beginning of a brief but remarkable chapter for the behemoth aircraft. Despite its immense size and lack of sophisticated targeting equipment for such a task, the Skywarrior proved to be an improbable but highly effective dive bomber. Then Lieutenant Junior Grade David Mason, a pilot with VH-4 aboard the USS Constellation in 1967, later recalled the paradox of their situation. He explained that his squadron was frequently tasked with dive bombing and close air support missions on Dixie Station. Mason acknowledged the sheer audacity of this assignment, emphasizing that the A-3 possessed neither a functional gun sight nor a bomb sight capable of precise ordnance delivery. Nevertheless, he recounted with evident pride that his unit's pilots, relying purely on skill and practiced judgment, had cultivated a reputation for being the most consistently accurate dive bombing unit in the entire theater of operations. This unlikely success story, however, came to an abrupt end due to a high-level observation. General William Westmoreland, the commander of U.S. forces in Vietnam, happened to witness an A-3 dive bombing run. Upon being informed that the aircraft performing these precise attacks had no bomb sights, he immediately deemed the practice unacceptable. His rationale was reportedly rooted in professional standards and public perception. He felt that regardless of the pilot's proven accuracy, he could not allow a situation where reporters might discover that the Navy was conducting bombing runs based on what amounted to inspired guesswork. The potential for negative press portraying the military as reckless or unprofessional was a risk he was unwilling to take. To salvage the capability, a makeshift solution was attempted by fitting some Skywarriors with gun sights from the smaller A-4 Skyhawk. However, this was described as a lash-up effort, a hasty and ultimately inadequate modification. Consequently, the A-3s were officially prohibited from conducting any further visual bombing missions over North or South Vietnam. While its days as a dive bomber were over, the aircraft's offensive role was not yet finished. With the advanced all-weather A-6 Intruder not yet widely available, the Skywarrior pivoted, leveraging its robust airframe and systems to perform critical radar-guided bombing missions at night and in adverse weather, a testament to the remarkable adaptability that would define its long and distinguished service career. The final chapter of the A-3 Skywarrior's combat service in Vietnam was destined to be its most ambitious and perilous mission, the first attempt to mine the vital river approaches to Haiphong Harbor in May 1967. For years, U.S. military planners had persistently argued for the strategic necessity of closing Haiphong, the primary artery through which military supplies from the Soviet Union and its allies flowed into North Vietnam. In the spring of 1967, President Lyndon Johnson finally approved, persuaded that such a bold move could decisively pressure Hanoi to enter serious negotiations. The formidable task was assigned to the A-3 detachment of VAH-4 operating from the USS Constellation. The mission profile was fraught with extreme danger. It was planned as a clandestine low-level night operation to be executed by 2 waves of 2 Skywarriors each. Each Whale was loaded with a staggering payload of 10 1,000-pound Mark 52 magnetic mines. The pilots were tasked with flying deep into enemy territory and releasing their ordnance into the 2 main river channels leading to the harbor from a terrifyingly low altitude of just 50 feet above the water, a maneuver designed to evade radar detection but leaving no margin for error. As the mission commenced, the tension on the carrier was palpable. David Mason, who was slated to fly as the number 2 aircraft in the second wave, later recounted the chilling moments that unfolded. Just before his group was scheduled to launch, a sudden and ominous silence fell over the operation. The carrier had lost all contact with one of the 2 A-3s from the leading wave. A wave of uncertainty swept through the command center. No one knew the fate of the missing aircraft and its crew, whether it had fallen victim to North Vietnamese anti-aircraft fire, suffered a mechanical failure, or met some other unknown demise. The critical implication was that if the aircraft had been shot down, the element of surprise would be lost, and the North Vietnamese would be fully alerted to the ongoing mining operation. Faced with this grave possibility, the leadership made the difficult but necessary decision to scrub the rest of the mission. In the aftermath, it was determined that the most probable cause of the loss was not enemy action, but a tragic accident. The crew had likely misjudged their altitude in the darkness and hit the water, resulting in a catastrophic breakup of the massive airframe. The original mission plan, meticulously crafted by VAH-4, was shelved but not forgotten. 5 years later, in May 1972, when President Nixon authorized Operation Pocket Money in response to the North Vietnamese Easter Offensive, those same plans were revived. However, by then, the Skywarrior was no longer the instrument of choice. The mission was successfully carried out by the more modern Grumman A-6 intruders. This transition marked the definitive end of the A-3's role as a frontline strike aircraft, a shift driven by 2 undeniable realities of the evolving air war. Firstly, by 1967, the Grumman A-6 intruder, an aircraft roughly half the size of the A-3 but capable of carrying a comparable bomb load with far more advanced all-weather targeting systems, had become widely available throughout the fleet. Secondly, the defensive environment over North Vietnam had grown increasingly lethal. The A-3, with its subsonic speed and large radar cross-section, was simply no longer fast or agile enough to survive the dense network of sophisticated surface-to-air missiles and anti-aircraft artillery that now protected key targets. Its time as a bomber was over, but its legacy as a versatile and indispensable support platform was only just beginning. Back in the tense years following World War II, the United States found itself locked in an escalating arms race with the Soviet Union. As both superpowers rushed to expand their nuclear arsenals, the U.S. Navy sought to secure its position in the new atomic age. The introduction of nuclear bombs into the U.S. arsenal opened new strategic possibilities for naval aviation beyond its traditional tactical role. While the U.S. Air Force maintained land-based bomber fleets, these aircraft faced a significant limitation: they couldn't reach large parts of the world. The Navy recognized this vulnerability and saw an opportunity. Aircraft carriers offered something revolutionary: a mobile nuclear strike platform that could deploy closer to potential targets. Furthermore, these floating airfields represented a unique advantage. They were difficult to target compared to fixed land bases. As one naval authority noted, it is doubtful that the enemy can have the same confidence in targeting mobile sea platforms in or beneath the ocean wastes. In January 1948, the Chief of Naval Operations formalized his vision by issuing a requirement for a long-range carrier-based attack plane capable of delivering either a 10,000-pound bomb load or a nuclear weapon. The aircraft would need to operate from the planned United States-class supercarriers with a target loaded weight of 100,000 pounds. Following the Navy's call, 8 aircraft manufacturers submitted proposals. Nevertheless, all except Douglas Aircraft Company and Curtiss-Wright eventually withdrew, declaring the requirements impossible within the weight limitations. Ed Heinemann, Douglas's chief designer, who would later gain fame for the A-4 Skyhawk, took a bold approach. Rather than designing for the massive supercarrier still on drawing boards, he proposed a significantly smaller aircraft weighing just 68,000 pounds, light enough to operate from existing Midway-class carriers. This decision proved prescient when the United States-class carriers were cancelled in April 1949, validating Heinemann's strategy. Heinemann had reasoned correctly that as technology advanced, nuclear weapons would decrease in size and weight, making a compact bomber increasingly practical. In July 1949, impressed by Douglas's innovative thinking, the Navy awarded the company a contract for 2 flight-capable prototypes and a static airframe. The A-3D design team, led by project engineer Harry Nichols and supervised by Ed Heinemann and Leo Devlin, faced a unique challenge. The main constraint was providing a large internal bomb bay accessible from the cockpit, as nuclear devices needed to be armed in flight. This requirement led to several distinctive design features: a swept-wing configuration mounted above the spacious bomb bay. A 3-person crew was grouped in a single cockpit behind the nose radome. Emphasis on weight reduction throughout the design process. Interestingly, the team chose a crew escape chute similar to that on the F-3D Skyknight rather than ejection seat, saving approximately 3,500 pounds. This weight-conscious approach enabled the A-3D to operate from smaller carriers at weights exceeding its design parameters, providing substantial growth potential. On October 28, 1952, the prototype XA-3D-1 performed its maiden flight under the control of George Jansen. Although initially equipped with problematic Westinghouse J-40 engines, the aircraft was subsequently fitted with more powerful Pratt & Whitney J-57 turbojets, solving early flutter issues while providing increased thrust and improved fuel efficiency. The A-3 Skywarrior would ultimately become the largest and heaviest aircraft ever designed for routine carrier operations, albeit ironically the smallest proposal among competitors that required even larger carriers not yet in service. The very concept of the A-3 Skywarrior was a direct challenge to the laws of physics and the practical limits of naval engineering. The task given to the legendary Douglas Aircraft Company design team, led by the renowned Ed Heinemann, was monumental: create an aircraft large enough to carry a nuclear weapon over vast distances, yet nimble and compact enough to operate routinely from the violent pitching deck of an aircraft carrier. This was a puzzle of conflicting requirements where every pound of weight and every inch of space was a precious commodity. The team's foundational solution was the selection of a high wing configuration. By mounting the massive wings atop the fuselage, they accomplished several critical goals at once. This elegant design naturally created an unobstructed cavernous space below for the aircraft's primary purpose, a massive bomb bay capable of holding a multi-ton nuclear device. It also provided the structural strength needed to support the enormous wings required for long-range flight. These wings, swept back at a sharp 36-degree angle, were optimized not for fighter-like agility, but for endurance, allowing the Skywarrior to cruise efficiently for hours on end. But a giant wingspan that is an asset in the air becomes a massive liability on a crowded carrier. To solve this parking problem, the engineers devised a masterpiece of mechanical origami. The A-3's outer wing sections, located just outboard of the powerful engines, folded neatly upward and inward, lying nearly flat against the fuselage. To shrink its profile even further, the entire vertical tail stabilizer was hinged, allowing it to fold horizontally to the starboard side. These features dramatically reduced the aircraft's footprint, enabling it to fit onto the carrier's elevators and be stowed in the tight confines of the hangar deck below. Getting such a heavy aircraft safely back onto the deck required mastering low-speed flight. Here, the Skywarrior incorporated a subtle but brilliant innovation: aerodynamically actuated leading-edge slats. Unlike slats on other aircraft that required pilot action, the A-3s extended automatically. As the aircraft slowed to its final approach speed, the change in air pressure alone would cause the slats to slide forward, effectively grabbing more air and increasing lift. This gave the pilot significantly better control and stability during the most critical phase of flight, preventing a sudden stall just moments from touchdown. The Skywarrior was also a trailblazer in its landing gear design, being the first aircraft of its immense size to use a tricycle configuration for carrier operations. This not only made takeoffs and landings inherently more stable than the old taildragger setup, but also kept the flight deck level for the crew. Because of the high wing design, the main landing gear had to retract rearward into the fuselage, resulting in a relatively narrow track. While this was an elegant solution, it made the aircraft notoriously tricky to handle on the deck in crosswinds. To get the beast airborne, especially when loaded to its maximum weight, sheer engine power wasn't always enough. The A-3 was therefore equipped with attachment points for up to 12 jet-assisted takeoff bottles. Firing these solid-fuel rockets provided a fiery, thunderous kick, literally blasting the heavy bomber off the deck in a shockingly short distance. For landing, a large deceleration chute deployed from the tail helped tame the aircraft's momentum, assisting the arresting gear in bringing the massive machine to a safe halt. Inside, the crew occupied a raised cockpit under a heavily framed canopy. The pilot and bombardier navigator sat side by side, while a third crewman sat behind them, initially tasked with operating twin 20mm tail cannons. This position was later converted into a station for an electronic warfare officer. In one of the most crucial design choices, the cockpit was connected to the bomb bay via a crawl space, as the nuclear weapons of the era required an armed in-flight check before being dropped. However, the relentless pursuit of weight savings led to the A-3's most controversial feature, the omission of ejection seats. Instead, the crew was provided with a downward opening escape chute. This decision saved an estimated 3,500 pounds, a massive amount in aircraft design, but it was a grim compromise. In an emergency at low altitude, particularly during launch or landing, the chute was virtually useless, a fact that gave rise to the crew's dark humor that the A-3's original designation, A-3D, actually stood for All Three Dead. Powering this giant were two Pratt & Whitney J57 turbojet engines housed in large underwing pods. The J57 was a revolutionary engine, the first in aviation history to be officially rated in the 10,000-pound thrust class. Its selection came after early prototypes struggled with a different, deeply problematic engine. The J57, however, proved to be a triumph. It was so successful that it not only powered the Skywarrior but also legendary aircraft like the Boeing B-52 Stratofortress and the first American jetliner, the Boeing 707. For its groundbreaking design, Pratt & Whitney was awarded the prestigious Collier Trophy in 1953, cementing the J57's place as one of the most important jet engines ever built. The Douglas A-3 Skywarrior demonstrated remarkable adaptability throughout its service life, evolving far beyond its original mission. Soon after entering service, this massive carrier-based aircraft would prove its value in multiple operational roles that extended its usefulness for decades. Before the operational deployment of Polaris Armed Fleet ballistic missile submarines, the A-3 Skywarrior served as the Navy's critical element in America's nuclear deterrent. Squadrons were organized into two heavy attack wings initially established at Naval Air Station, North Island, California, and Naval Air Station, Jacksonville, Florida. The former relocated to NAS Whidbey Island, Washington in December 1957, while the latter moved to NAS Sanford, Florida. In combat, the Skywarrior carried up to 12,000 pounds of weaponry in its spacious fuselage bomb bay. As the strategic bombing mission faded after 1964, many A-3Bs were converted to Ka-3B tankers. These aircraft carried just over 34,000 pounds of fuel, of which two-thirds could be transferred to other aircraft through a drogue system. The Ka-3B tankers extended the range of jet aircraft operating with U.S. Navy sea forces. Almost every strike launched from carriers on Yankee Station in the Gulf of Tonkin included a whale tanker to refuel combat-damaged aircraft. One tanker detachment was credited with saving 71 aircraft during an 8-month deployment. The Douglas A-3D Skywarrior also found new life as the RA-3B reconnaissance platform. These aircraft were equipped with 12 high-resolution cameras in the pressurized bomb bay. The RA-3B's contributions to intelligence gathering were significant, offering detailed insights into enemy positions and movements. Photo reconnaissance. Skywarriors primarily operated from land bases in Guam, the Philippines, Thailand, and South Vietnam. With IR gear installed, these aircraft flew at night, monitoring the movement of troops down roads and trails in Laos. Perhaps the most versatile variant was the EKA-3B, which combined tanker capabilities with electronic warfare systems. In 1967, the Navy began converting 34 Skywarrior tankers to this configuration. Electronic jamming equipment was added without removing refueling systems, allowing the EKA-3B to disrupt enemy radar while waiting to refuel tactical aircraft. These aircraft incorporated an ALT-27 jamming system in an under-fuselage canoe to disrupt communications used by Vietnamese MiG pilots, plus 2 ALQ-92 jamming pods to fog surveillance radars. 3 squadrons operated the EKA-3B on 5 carriers through the final U.S. air campaigns over Vietnam in 1972 and 1973. Among the numerous incarnations of the versatile Skywarrior, none was more secretive or technologically significant than the EA-3B. Conceived in the clandestine world of Cold War espionage and initially designated A3D-1Q, the specialized aircraft became the U.S. Navy's premier carrier-based platform for electronic intelligence and signals intelligence for over 3 decades. The genesis of the EA-3B stemmed from a strategic pivot. As the primary nuclear deterrent mission shifted towards submarine-launched ballistic missiles, the Navy recognized the immense potential of the A-3's large and stable airframe. Beginning in 1956, a select number of airframes were pulled from the bomber fleet to undergo a radical transformation. The cavernous bomb bay, originally designed to house a nuclear weapon, was ingeniously repurposed. Engineers designed and installed a pressurized, climate-controlled compartment within this space, creating a sophisticated airborne laboratory. This tin can, as crew sometimes called it, was packed with an array of sensitive receivers, analyzers, and recording equipment, and provided stations for a team of electronic warfare specialists. A total of 24 Skywarriors underwent this complex conversion, being officially redesignated as the EA-3B in 1962. This transformation significantly altered the aircraft's crew composition and internal layout. The EA-3B typically carried a crew of 7. The flight deck remained largely standard with a pilot, co-pilot, and navigator. In the rear compartment, an electronic warfare officer supervised a team of 3 highly trained electronic systems operators, each specializing in different parts of the radio frequency spectrum. To accommodate the new mission and its associated equipment, the defensive tailgun turret with its twin 20mm cannons was removed. In its place, engineers installed additional electronic countermeasures gear and antennas, turning the aircraft's tail cone into a hub for electronic detection. The EA-3B's suite of passive receivers allowed its crew to detect, classify, analyze, and precisely locate a wide range of enemy radar and communication signals, from early warning radars to the specific guidance frequencies of surface-to-air missile systems. During the Vietnam War, land-based EA-3Bs operating from Da Nang Air Base became indispensable assets. They flew long, grueling missions, methodically patrolling the skies to monitor activity along the Ho Chi Minh Trail and deep within North Vietnam's formidable air defense network. Their primary and most critical task was to provide real-time threat warnings to American strike packages. The EA-3Bs were particularly effective at identifying the electronic signature of the Soviet-supplied SA-2 guideline SAM systems, giving friendly aircraft precious seconds to take evasive action. The effectiveness and efficiency of this small fleet were legendary, with one crew member remarking on their ability to perform a complex intelligence gathering job that often required much larger land-based platforms. Beyond Vietnam, the EA-3B's carrier-based capability provided unparalleled operational flexibility. Unlike large land-based reconnaissance aircraft like the RC-135, the electric whale could be deployed anywhere in the world that an aircraft carrier could sail. From the tense waters of the Mediterranean to the strategic choke points of the South China Sea, these aircraft conducted high-stakes missions, often flying provocatively close to hostile airspace to tickle enemy defenses and collect invaluable SIGINT on Soviet and Warsaw Pact military capabilities. However, operating this behemoth from a carrier deck was a masterclass in aviation skill and nerve. The aircraft presented numerous technical challenges. Its landing gear had a relatively narrow track, which combined with the extremely high tire pressures required for carrier landings made recoveries notoriously difficult and unforgiving. Furthermore, its early generation Pratt & Whitney J57 axial flow jet engines suffered from significant throttle lag. This meant that pilots had to anticipate power requirements far in advance, making precise adjustments during the critical final approach a high-stakes guessing game. Compounding these risks was the most infamous design flaw: the lack of ejection seats for the entire crew. In a catastrophic emergency at low altitude, their only hope was a small downward opening escape hatch, a system that offered virtually no chance of survival during the perilous phases of launch and recovery. After an unparalleled service, life spanning nearly 4 decades, an era in naval aviation came to a close as the curtain finally fell on the Douglas A-3 Skywarrior. The venerable whale flew its last combat missions not over the jungles of Vietnam, but over the deserts of the Middle East. During Operations Desert Shield and Desert Storm in 1991, the aging but still essential EA-3B electronic warfare variants were called upon one last time. Flying high above the chaotic battlefield, they served as critical intelligence gathering platforms, listening for Iraqi radar emissions and communications, mapping electronic threats, and providing an invisible shield for the younger, more modern strike aircraft they supported. This final vital contribution marked the twilight of an extraordinary career that had begun at the dawn of the Cold War. The process of retiring this aviation giant had begun several years earlier. In 1987, the A-3 officially ended its tailhook career, marking 32 years of continuous and demanding operations from the decks of aircraft carriers. However, this milestone was tragically overshadowed in the very same year by a devastating accident. An EA-3B with all 7 of its crew members aboard was lost while attempting a night landing on the USS Nimitz. This poignant and somber event served as a stark reminder of the inherent dangers of carrier aviation and the unique risks associated with operating such a large aircraft in that environment. The final official retirement for the entire fleet was formalized on September 27, 1991. In a fitting, albeit somber, final chapter, the decision to retire the last of the Skywarriors was made by Vice Admiral Richard Dunleavy. His signature on the order carried a profound personal weight, as Dunleavy himself had begun his naval aviation career as a bombardier navigator in the back of an A-3. It was a duty performed by someone who intimately understood the aircraft's history, capabilities, and the community of airmen who had flown and maintained it for so long. To ensure its monumental legacy would not be forgotten, a number of Skywarriors were preserved for future generations. Today, these historic aircraft stand as silent testaments to their era. Within the hallowed halls of the National Naval Aviation Museum in Pensacola, Florida, visitors can see 2 examples, including an early A3D-1 model. At Fort George Meade, an EA-3B stands in solemn tribute at the National Vigilance Park, honoring the clandestine and often dangerous missions performed by airborne intelligence crews. In a remarkable display of its robust design, the last flying EA-3B continued its service well after its military retirement, supporting advanced test programs for the defense contractor Raytheon into the 2010s. Ultimately, the Skywarrior's most enduring legacy is not cast in metal, but in philosophy. Its legendary designer, Ed Heinemann, once reflected that the aircraft was definitive proof that there are occasions when what the majority say is impossible can be made possible. The A-3 embodied this principle. Its very existence as strategic bomber capable of operating from a carrier was once deemed impossible. The aircraft's record-breaking maximum takeoff weight of 84,000 pounds from a carrier deck shattered conventional thinking. This audacious design philosophy, which prioritized a large adaptable airframe with immense growth potential, is precisely what allowed the A-3 to evolve from a bomber into a tanker, a VIP transport, a trainer, and a premier electronic warfare platform. This concept of creating a versatile platform that can be continuously adapted to meet changing requirements continues to influence the design of modern military aircraft, ensuring that the spirit of the mighty whale still soars in the skies today. So from a revolutionary nuclear bomber that defied conventional wisdom to a surprisingly accurate dive bomber without a bomb sight, and finally to a vital gas station in the sky and an indispensable electronic spy plane, the story of the Douglas A-3 Skywarrior is a testament to brilliant forward-thinking design. The Whale was an aircraft born from an impossible requirement, a machine of profound contradictions. It was the largest and heaviest aircraft to ever routinely operate from a carrier, yet it was the smallest proposal submitted for the job. It was a strategic bomber that found its greatest fame not for the bombs it dropped, but for the aircraft it refueled and the intelligence it gathered. And it was a platform so fundamentally sound that it outlived its original mission by decades, constantly adapting, evolving, and proving its worth time and time again. The A-3 Skywarrior is more than just a piece of aviation history, it's a lesson in adaptability. It shows how a solid engineering foundation can allow a machine and the brave crews who flew it to meet challenges that its original designers could have never imagined. It's a story of skill over technology, of ingenuity over adversity, and of a legacy that quietly shaped naval aviation for nearly 40 years. But now, I want to turn it over to you. We've talked about its roles as a bomber tanker and spy plane, but what other what-if scenarios could the Skywarrior have excelled in? Given its massive airframe and payload capacity, do you think it could have been adapted into an effective anti-submarine warfare platform, perhaps carrying torpedoes and sonobuoys? Or could it have served as an early AWACS-style command and control aircraft? Let us know your thoughts and theories in the comment section below. We love reading your insights and ideas. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video and learned something new, please help us out by hitting that like button. It helps the channel grow. And if you want to see more stories about legendary aircraft and military history, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell so you never miss an upload.